storage software, we're driving a new era of innovation. We call it the innovation ecosystem. And over the next set of videos, I'm introducing key partners who are evolving and driving differential solutions to fix customer problems, providing unique value of innovative capabilities on our proven and built on trusted foundations, data protection and data management platforms. So maybe if you just give me a little introduction to TriDatum.
TriDatum is about helping people rethink the conventional ways of doing things. So we're transformation consultants. But then, as a result, the existing assets in their environment, more often than not, they're not even aware of how efficient or inefficient it's currently being consumed. Yeah. So helping people to refine, gain an understanding and refine the existing assets is our second piece. And then the challenges associated with cloud, however one may define that, the big data, which most people speak to big data as analytics, but then they forget that if the data you're analyzing doesn't have the level of integrity required, then what's the purpose?
It's a qualitative, isn't it? If you've missed the quality.
Our approach to the big data space is more, big data is out here, that's end result, and why. I want to drive more sales. I want to, at the end of the day, it's give me more insight into what I currently have so that I can now sell more based on the existing data sets. But ecosystem to enable that, nobody's really addressing. So how do we thin and appropriately align so that we can store as efficiently as possible in the appropriate on-prem environment, off-prem, or cloud, if you will. How we go about protecting and not just enabling recovery, but automating the testing of what you need to recover with adequate and appropriate reporting according to the different levels of management, etc. That's missing.
I think it's very easy to be seduced by talking about real leaps forward in technology, and people talk almost purposefully subjectively about cloud and big data. But the reality is so many businesses out there running on legacy assets that are still, in the trenches. And we talk about sophisticated technology and ideas, but the reality is business is just struggling to keep the lights on. And I think analysts, clients that we talk to, some of the problems they have are really around root cause analysis, getting good visibility of the assets and optimizing them, and understanding how they can transform infrastructure with no risk to the business. So what type of things do you do around that risk mitigation that allows clients to really understand their service and what's the right transformation path for them?
So in order to begin the conversations around rethinking, you need to have a very clear empirical understanding of an environment. So the tools necessary to analyze, to capture non-disruptively the current state is where it begins. And then from there, you can now look at how the existing assets are being utilized. So no longer, the way I'm seeing it, people don't care really about the technology, it's a commodity. We have these different problems, or we have these different requirements that we need to address, but we don't know how to get there. Most people are trying to sell a point product to help them get there, whereas I believe the approach is more of a, let's step back, gain an empirical based understanding of the existing environment. Let's look at your current infrastructure to see how we can maximize as much as possible the efficiencies that you can currently get from it. And then from there, determine which technologies and therefore
I think
manufacturers.
That's a very consultative approach. I think that requirements gathering sometimes has been based on interviews, conversations, and that can be quite subjective, and you don't actually get to I think you call it empirical data.
Yeah.
So how do TriDatum actually not impact on the guys, the operations team, the people who are running the business, but still get to the real content about how that infrastructure is utilized?
So tools such as Butterfly, Servergraph, and others enable us to not only gain insight from you think you're backing up successfully X number of times a week. Well, in reality, this is what it is. You think your costs associated with your infrastructure is X, but you really don't know. So the use of these tools now remove the guesswork, which empower the decision makers to make decisions based on facts versus either the stories that their existing technical team are trying to create to validate their jobs, or the manufacturers, VARs, are trying to sell. So it absolutely has to begin with empirical-based data.
What is interesting, I think, big data or analytics have always been very, they're getting very seductive, but the reality is the insight that's derived from the patterns still requires some expertise to interpret them.
So I think it basically comes down to your ability to think in a multidimensional way. So there's no one thing, like you said, I can't judge based on the past.
So there's no single KPI that allows you to just make it a simple decision.
Correct. And those that assist in those efforts have to be able to not only understand the multidimensional aspects, because it's no longer I'm going to buy a server and a piece of storage. Why am I buying this server? Why am I do I have to, or can I add more, or whatever? But that now requires you to look at the ecosystem as a whole, which therefore means multidimensional thinking, and therefore solutions that are, even though they may be specific to problems, they have to be able to be integrated in such a way to where we have this simplicity of management, deployment, and then more importantly, that single point of support.
I absolutely love this vision. I think the client value in this is huge, potentially. And my concern is, is the data and data protection, those assets, they're so sticky because there's a risk if people try to transform them or change them. There's a risk to all that backup content or archive data. And they become they age, become legacy, but no one really wants to bear the risk of trying to upgrade or transform them because they may know that they're aged, they may know that they're outdated. So how do you, what do you do to break that cycle and actually allow clients to have a journey to adopt and leverage better commercial models, better technology models in line with that service?
I think it begins with changing the way you think and approach the client. So more often than not, solutions are designed for production first, when in reality, if we were to shift and take a look at more from a recovery standpoint, that now allows us to align more appropriately the use of these assets. And if we can now align more appropriately the use of these assets, it's no longer a rip and replace type of conversation, which is where the majority of the risk is. So too often, what we're seeing is we need more, we need more, we need more. And then the decision maker says, I've given you more. How do I know that what I've given you, you're appropriately utilizing? Gaining insight based on empirical data, right? Now when we say you need, this is why, and it's not based on an opinion.
So what impact does this have on a client, this type of engagement? Is this like a heavyweight consultancy team, or what investment from the client is required to get this level of like snapshot visibility on utilization?
So our approach is a no fee, no obligation one. So financially, there is none. And the reason for that is we have to earn the right to do business, as should everybody else. And then the tools that we use need to have minimal, if any, impact on the production environment. So when you combine the two, gaining insight from tools and from approach, it becomes
very lightweight.
Very lightweight, low cost, if any, alternative, and most people are looking for that. When we go in and we, at the end of the analysis, this is what we've found. These are our recommendations. These assets will be utilized in this way versus the way you are.
Also reuse and optimize existing.
Maybe you have to acquire new assets.
Yeah.
And maybe you have to replace some of those assets. But whenever there's a replacement of assets, there's always somebody else in need of what's being replaced. So there's always some kind of value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's good. Really good.